The honourable member for Brampton East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is always an honour to rise in this House to speak to the government's second budget titled Building the Middle Class. My constituents elected me to serve as part of a government that will help the middle class and those working hard to join it. To be able to represent these priorities of the residents of Brampton East in this House is a privilege. I'm lucky to be a member of the Standing Committee on Finance, which has kept me quite busy thus far. Just recently, the Committee on Finance conducted a report on tax fairness for all Canadians by studying tax evasion and tax avoidance. The report concluded with 14 recommendations to the government on topics such as conducting a review of the Voluntary Disclosures Program and requiring all tax advisors to register their tax products with the CRA. I'm proud to share that in response to the Finance Committee's recommendations, the government affirmed its support for all 14 recommendations. Additionally, the government shared the work that has already been done or is currently being undertaken to ensure all Canadians pay their fair share of taxes to our great nation. Mr. Speaker, paying our fair share of taxes is an essential part of financing measures that enhance all Canadians' quality of life. When certain individuals and companies find ways to cheat the system, it is the middle class that usually picks up the tab. That, Mr. Speaker, is totally unacceptable and counterproductive to our country's goals. That is why making the tax system more fair is an ongoing priority of our government. In support of this objective, Budget 2017 proposes to invest additional resources to combat tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. Budget 2017 also proposes legislative changes to the tax rules. These changes would also include closing tax loopholes that result in unfair tax advantages for some of the expense of others, invest additional resources to crack down on tax evasion and combat tax avoidance, making existing tax relief for individuals and families more effective and accessible, eliminate ineffective and inefficient tax measures, and provide greater consistency in the operation of tax rules. Going forward, we will continue to eliminate poorly targeted and inefficient tax measures and make our tax system more fair and efficient. Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to taking these steps because we know and understand that fairness is essential to ensuring Canadians have confidence in their tax system. Last year in Budget 2016, our government committed to undertaking a wide-ranging review of the increasingly complex tax expenditures that now exist. This review of federal tax expenditures has highlighted a number of issues regarding tax planning strategies using private corporations, which can result in high-income individuals gaining unfair tax advantages. A variety of tax reduction strategies are available to these individuals that are not available to other Canadians. An example of such a strategy is the use of private corporations to reduce taxes through sprinkling income to family members. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2017 sends a strong signal to the government that the government is taking action to ensure that high-income individuals cannot use strategies involving private corporations to gain unfair tax advantages. The government will release a paper in the coming months setting out the nature of these issues as well as proposed policy responses. In addressing these issues, the government will ensure that corporations that contribute to job creation and economic growth by actively investing in their businesses continue to benefit from a highly competitive tax regime. Mr. Speaker, a fair tax system requires constant attention. Ongoing legislative adjustments are needed to ensure that rules are functioning as intended and they do not result in some taxpayers paying less than their fair share. For example, through complicated tax planning arrangements. To ensure that the tax system operates as fairly and effectively as possible moving forward, the government will continue to study, identify, and address tax loopholes and tax planning schemes. Mr. Speaker, tax evasion and avoidance is unfair to the vast majority of Canadian individuals and businesses that play by the rules. The measures in Budget 2017 will build on previous investments to support the Canada Revenue Agency and its continued efforts to crack down on tax evasion and tax avoidance. To do this, the CRA is increasing its verification activities, hiring additional auditors and specialists with a focus on the underground economy, developing robust business intelligence, infrastructure and risk assessment systems, and improving the quality of investigative work that targets criminal tax evaders. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2017 will invest an additional $523 million over 5 years to support these efforts. As CRA has a proven track record of meeting expectations from targeted tax compliance, Budget 2017 accounts for the expected additional revenue of $2.5 billion over 5 years from these measures that crack down on tax evasion and combat tax avoidance. We know that in a globalized world, it's not enough to simply concentrate our efforts here at home. We need to have an international focus as well. To this end, Canada is part of a coordinated international effort to address what is known as base erosion and profit sharing, given the acronym BEPS. BEPS refers to tax planning arrangements used by multinational enterprises to unfairly minimize their taxes. Canada has implemented, or is in the process of implementing, agreed international standards under BEPS project. This includes recently enacted legislation which requires large multinational enterprises to provide information about the international distribution of their activities. This information will enable tax authorities to better assess tax avoidance risks. We will continue to work with our international partners to ensure a coherent and consistent response in fighting tax avoidance through BEPS. Mr. Speaker, over the past year, we have worked to build a fairer tax system that benefits the middle class. Our review of tax measures identified opportunities that make existing tax measures more effective, equitable, and accessible to all Canadians. Specifically, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2017 proposes to simplify and improve existing tax measures for caregivers, persons with disabilities, and students. Right now, Canadians who are cared for by loved ones face a caregiver credit system that is complex and difficult for families to navigate. So we've simplified it by introducing the Canada Caregiver Credit. This new non-refundable credit will provide greater support to those who need it the most. It will apply to caregivers whether they live in or not with the family member that they're taking care of. This measure will provide $310 million in additional tax relief over the 2016-2017 period and will support families struggling to take care of loved ones. Mr. Speaker, Canada is a country founded on the belief that with hard work comes success, and that with success comes a responsibility to help others. Canadians share the understanding that success as a nation is only as great as the success of our most vulnerable. And they know that challenging the barriers that persist is a necessary part of moving our country forward. Budget 2017 takes the next step in the government's long-term economic plan, understanding that the face of unprecedented change, a confident Canadian middle class will always be the beating heart of our country and the engine of our economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member opposite for his speech, albeit with enthusiasm. He addressed some of the minutiae of the budget, but seemed to miss the main point of the budget, which is that we've racked up a huge deficit, $23 billion this last year and $28 billion in the year to come, and the whole point of that was to create well-paying jobs and to try to grow the economy. But the budget 2017 figures clearly show that GDP growth is less than before we spent all of that money. And we're a year and a half into the government's mandate, and really no progress has been made on many of the government promises. They haven't been able to get the infrastructure money going out the door quickly enough, so construction jobs in our country are down by 16%, and they haven't been able to create well-paying jobs for the youth, and they're telling them to get used to precarious employment. So I could go on, no electoral reform, no home mail delivery, no action on pay equity, but really the point of it is if the 2016 budget with all of its spending accomplished nothing, would the member agree that the 2017 budget with even less spending will achieve less?
Member for Brampton East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her question. But let's look at the facts. I mean, our government is not going to take any lessons from the Conservative Party of Canada on the economy. I mean, they had 10 years in government, and what did they have? Let's look at the facts. They had the lowest job growth in any Prime Minister that served for 10 years. They had the lowest economic growth of any Prime Minister that served for 10 years. But let's see what our government's done. We've created 220,000 jobs, mostly full-time jobs, in the last 6 months. We've decreased unemployment from 7.1% to 6.6%, and it's continued to decline. Our investments are working. We reduced taxes on the middle class. We increased taxes on the wealthiest 1% of Canadians. So I encourage the member opposite and their entire party to look at the facts, to go knock on doors, because our investments in the middle class are working and are making the lives of Canadians better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires, l'honorable député.
The honourable member for Jonquière. We've asked several times in the House, what is the government's definition of the middle class? And now we're seeing that the definition of the middle class for the government is all families and those who earn over $80,000 a year. We've also often heard them talk about all those who are working hard to join the middle class. So why in this budget here, Mr. Speaker, a budget for 2017, for all those who are working hard, why is there nothing at all for workers in the forestry sector? We're asking the government, and we've been calling on them for months now, to put in place a loan guarantee program to defend our forestry sector in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. It's over 11,000 jobs that are at risk. Those are good jobs. In Quebec, over 60,000 people work in the sector. These are people, mothers, fathers, who are putting food on the table for their families. So why in this budget is, if they're talking about a definition of the middle class as people who are working hard, why is there absolutely nothing for the forestry sector? Thank you.
For Brampton East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for the question. What I never understood about the NDP is their ongoing rhetoric about the working class. You know, working class families work in all different sectors, whether it's forestry, whether it's aerospace, whether it's the taxi drivers or the truck drivers. And you know what they're benefiting from, Mr. Speaker? They're benefiting from the middle class tax cut that we implemented last year. You know what they're also benefiting, Mr. Speaker? They're benefiting from the Canada Child benefit that we implemented last year. You know what they're also going to benefit from, Mr. Speaker? They're going to benefit from the $7 billion that we're investing in 2017 in affordable childcare spaces. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? Every time the NDP had an opportunity to help the working class, what did they do? Surprise, surprise, they voted against it. So why don't they change their own track record and try saying that, following their rhetoric about helping the middle class, helping the working class, and support this government's work of ensuring that all Canadians across the country, if they work hard, they're able to achieve success. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, it's always an honour to stand in this House and to debate the issues that governments face and that Canadians face. And the